to Since Rookie Season.
Well, the summer before.
A heated rivalry fan companion podcast where your hosts, Amanda, Lau, and Lauren, break down the episodes from the Creative Canada television series, the Game Changers novels, and various media surrounding this fan phenomenon.
Today we're looking at the concept of fandom and how the heated rivalry fandom works. Stay with us for some discussion on this social phenomenon with another new guest.
Hi, welcome back. We were off last week because some of us were in Florida.
Some of us live in Florida.
Honestly, like 3 out of the 4 people on this podcast today are in Florida. So we're happy to be back, and we're happy to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is fandom today. And our guest today is Kate Pryor, who is one of my friends from my PhD program. And I'm going to let her go ahead and introduce herself.
Okay. Hi, my name is Kate Pryor. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Central Florida in the Text and Technology program. So Lauren was just a few years ahead of me, same advisor. So a lot of our focus is fandom studies and like digital media as a whole. My work that I do is I kind of situate myself between queer fandom and how fans communicate on social media, particularly with each other and with the creator of the IP or the showrunner, the director, etc. And so I, my current dissertation that I'm working on is looking at Superman, the DCU Superman by James Gunn. And when Lauren invited me to talk about the fandom, I kind of laughed because what I did for my dissertation is basically the exact same thing that the heated rivalry fandom is going through, just a different fandom. And so I was like, yeah, no, that is my bread and butter of how different fans talk on different platforms, you know, the Twitter versus Threads, how they talk about the person of interest or like that parasocial relationship, and how they talk about the creators. So like, how do fans talk amongst themselves about Jacob Tierney or about Rachel Reed on different platforms?
Yeah, so Kate and I do like very different kind of parts of fan studies, but I feel like we have definitely some interactions. So I know I'm very excited to hear what you all have to say about all of this stuff today. But I guess we'll kind of get started on our various notes. Kate, I thought it would be good for us to, first of all, talk about how did you get into heated rivalry? Where were you, started at? Where did you get started at?
I vaguely remember during like 2023 kind of seeing people talk about like more, not mainstream because it wasn't really mainstream until now, but the picking up of queer romance novels, like across like Twitter and Tumblr and that kind of stuff, like very after like COVID. And so some of the people I had followed for Red, White, and Royal Blue, like were talking about and sharing the trailer. And so I heard about it over the summer, like that last summer, like officially. I was like, okay, people are talking about this book. I'm always like looking for queer fandoms on social media. What are these people talking about? I would love to, consume the product myself. What is it? And so I started following people on social media when the first trailer came out, which is when I think October is when they started like promoting the show. And at that point I had read Heated Rivalry. So I read the second Game Changers book before the show came out.
Okay. Awesome. The other thing we have been kind of like, before we get into like the nitty gritty of our conversation, we've been talking about throughout this entire season of Since Rookie Season, this entire podcast, why do we think heated rivalry is so addictive? We talked about it as a book. We've talked about it as a TV show. We want your feedback. Why do you think it's addictive? Why do you think people are into it?
I think it's a combination of things. Like, I really think different types of people get different things out of it, or at least what made them gravitate towards the story, towards the TV show. I know for me personally, it was just more openly queer media in general, having like the main characters be openly queer and openly like having sex, dealing with like day-to-day stuff, and then having it have a happy ending or happy-ish. I'm with
Happy
Hudson like on the kind of happy ending, but that idea of it just being very open and explicit and like any other romance show would be, like how last summer was like the summer I turned pretty, or like that kind of stuff where it allows you to like, oh, it is presented as normal.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also think part of it is the explicitness of it, like of the sex scenes, where typically, again, if a TV show or movie has explicit queer sex, it's typically on a movie or TV show that is inherently darker. So it's usually presented as like Game of Thrones or some of the other like HBO TV shows. The topic and the theme of the story itself is darker and usually, unhappy, or at least, not a romance at all. So it's
Mm-hmm.
usually like a drama, a thriller, historical period pieces. It's not usually set in modern day. And
Yeah.
so to have a modern day setting romance that is so explicit, that is like any other romance show, I think a lot of people were like, oh, okay, this is different because we've never had this before. I think
Mm-hmm.
Red, White, and Royal Blue did a lot in terms of the zeitgeist of everyone wanted to watch the movie. I do think there was like a little jump where in at least the movie they kind of toned down the sex scenes a little bit, where this was like, no, we are literally like showing you everything.
Mm-hmm.
Except, so I think having
Except,
that, yeah. But I think that level of like, okay, like we actually get to watch something sexy and happy that involves like queer sex and queer joy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other piece, and we'll probably get into this in a minute, but we know based on Lauren's research with Dr. Stanfill that queer women love to read and write and consume romance, whether that is
Mm-hmm.
fan fiction, books, movies, TV shows. We know that it is queer women who are in this market of wanting to consume those types of stories.
Yeah, I think that actually leads us really nicely into kind of like our first point, which is like, what is the history of fandom? And I think you and I can definitely take this. I know Amanda wants to talk a little etymology about where that word comes from, but I think we can do a little bit of history first. So when we think about fandom as it's kind of currently conceived. This is really rising out of like the 1960s and 70s Star Trek fandom, who are, meeting in person at conventions. We have people writing and producing fanzines for the first time in their lives and handing them out at conventions. It's very physical fandom. And it's all centered around the shipping of Kirk and Spock. Like, this is where our our original fandom comes from, like it is shipping. Fandom studies as a field is really conceived in like the late 80s, early 90s, with works like by Camille Bacon Smith, which is the Enterprising Women. It's not Young Women. It's Enterprising Women, which is specifically about women in the Star Trek fandom. We've got works from Constance Penley, as well as the guy that everybody has probably read if you've ever read fandom studies, Henry Jenkins, who is an emeritus professor at the University of Southern California. They kind of kick off fan studies as a field in the 90s. But fan studies, it's super white. It's super focused on white women and their reading habits and their understanding of the media objects that they consume. Really big fandoms during this time are the X-Files fandom. A lot of it is really focused on either romance or, as we call it, slash fiction. We see an uptick in what we call femme slash, which is lesbian or FF shipping in the early 2000s with things like Xena, Warrior Princess. I know that Mel, our advisor, or my former advisor, Kate's current advisor, does a lot of work there, but largely the field is very focused on white women and how they read and consume things. Now, I've done more recent research. I did a demographic survey in 2022, and it does show that fandom is getting queerer and that it is getting like, it is maybe less white people, but it is like 75% white people and like 50% straight people. So there's definitely a lot of that most people still ship romance as like their main ship, but we also see a rise in things like gen fiction, which maybe doesn't technically have a ship. There are more people who are identifying as, you know, bisexual or asexual, so a lot of that content is being brought in. But that's kind of a very, very brief of fan studies. I would say, you know, there are a lot of people who are now trying to focus the field into talking about things like race and gender and disability. That's where a lot of my work is at. It's always been very queer focused. I feel like that has always been kind of a part of it. But names like Rukmini Pandey, she writes a book called Squee from the Margins about being a fan of color and the way that fans of color are systematically and systemically pushed out of fandom all of the time. There's squishes, or I don't know if is it squish?
Scream?
Stitches Media Mix.
Oh, that
Also,
one. Yes,
Black Fan does a lot of this kind of research. Our advisor, Mel Stanfield, does a lot of research on whiteness studies and fandom. Also, how we can conceive of like alt-right movements as fan movements, like how we can use the language of fandom to talk about the alt-right movements that are currently happening in the United States, like the Trump MAGA disgustingness. But yeah, I think that is kind of very briefly where we can start off. Kate, do you want to add anything to that?
I think just to highlight, because I'm sure we'll mention this later, is that we know historically that the original like Star Trek fans were older women, and so like they were in their late 20s, 30s, and beyond, who were the founders and actively engaged in writing the fanfic and doing the fanzines and all of that kind of stuff. Is that they weren't teenagers or like young adults. It was usually 25 and up.
Yeah,
And I was gonna say, and they were mostly, or like a majority of them, were in like STEM fields, or like they were working women, right? So they knew about life, like they had life experience. And so I think that is important to highlight, because I think we are seeing like different age groups appear in the heated rivalry fandom.
Yeah, for sure. So Amanda wants to know, where do you think the etymology of fandom comes from?
So I did some Googling, some poking about. I checked a couple different sources just to verify. But I found that fandom comes from the early 1900s, which surprised me. It was first mentioned in 1903 and then later in 1928 reference fall, which I find funny. But fandom was a bit of a portmanteau of like fan from fanatic got shortened to fan, and then dumb, D-O-M, meaning from like an area like controlled by someone, or like wisdom, like a certain like realm. And so this area of community, or these people that, you know, partook in this, I don't know, media that were big fans of it, it got shoved together to be fandom, which makes a lot of sense, and I would believe it. And I've checked a couple sources that seem to be true, but I trust you two, y'all's opinions over the internet. But yeah, that's where I found fandom came from.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely got that fanatic root in it, and so I think it also stems out of things like Beatlemania, like made fandom really popular.
I was going to ask about Beatlemania.
Yeah,
because to me is that's the first reference that I have.
Yeah, and it's like it's taking place at the same time that like Star Trek is like coming out. You know, so like that is definitely something that is like going to be definitely like a
because you are having like all this phenomenon of fan mail suddenly like showering these musicians and all, like, well, we have all seen the images, I think, of people like mostly women waiting for the band.
For sure, yeah. I'm sure we'll talk about this. Like, I think a lot of fandom gets like a bad rap because it's like associated with teenagers, and that's where like some of that Beatlemania aspect came in, because it was a lot of like young teenage girls. But like when we're talking about early fandom, like they were not like, there was no internet connecting them. They needed to have disposable income to be able to go to conventions, to be able to send each other zines. I've seen like letters from fans to other fans that were like, when I die, erase all of my, like, burn all of my physical zines, like get rid of them, because I don't need people to know that I was shipping Kirk and Spock.
Nice.
Which I think is hilarious.
I just want to add before we continue, as someone who, like, I'm not a psychologist, but my mom is a child development expert. She's a psychologist, and I help write her most recent book with her business
Ooh.
partner, and it's about teenagers and
Yeah.
the teenager brain. And I just want to say teenagers get very bad rep, and it's one of the most fascinating moments of human development. And
Yes.
since we're going to talk about fandom, and there's like all the stigma around it and around fandoms that involve mostly teenagers, I just want our listeners to hold a lot of compassion. I am sure if you have been a teenager that you remember how miserable you were. So and
Real.
how absolutely chaotic your brain process could be
Yeah.
sometimes, how impulsive you felt. But I don't want anyone listening to us disqualifying teenagers as non-intelligent or
Mm.
incapable of nuance, because we have brilliant human beings that are going through this very difficult moment.
Yeah, there's also like research that says that like your brain is actually in the like teenage phase until like your mid 30s.
Yeah,
I
so
would
Like
we are teenagers. Well, I'm yeah.
I am a teenager girl.
There's this poem
Same.
that I adore. I adore Olivia Gatwood. I love her writing. I love her poetry. But one of my all-time favorite poems ever, but also by her, is called "We Are All Teenage Girls." I really encourage everyone to go either listen or read it. Her readings are my favorite. I just love spoken poetry. But she's talking about like, I think like the ocean is a teenage girl, and my dad is a teenage girl, my dog is a teenage girl, and this whole thing of all of these different things of how teenage girls make up different components of our society. And it's like, who teaches us to scream like at boy bands or at sports events or different things like that. Or and I think that's very intrinsic to fandom culture. And I'm gonna bring up sports as well later on, but the inherent gender dynamics within it.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, coming into adulthood or like being a young adult and finding things to get really attached to is inherently like teenager. Once you're finding your personality and things to attach yourself to, as you're growing into your character, I think it is a very relevant as well.
Yeah, for sure. When did you all discover fandom? That's what I would love to know. Like what was your like first fandom, and then like when did you discover it?
I can go first because I'm wearing a shirt, even though I know like there's a whole discussion on like the death of your fandom because it's so old that something problematic happened, and now you're kind of like, okay, like this is fine. But like my first fandom was a boy band, and so like I have my Big Timer shirt on, but a lot of it was surrounded like a boy band, and so you have that level of real person fiction of you are fans of real people versus a fictional character like in a movie or a TV show. So that was my big thing. And so I was on Tumblr between like 2012 to 2016, like in its heyday. And then quite quickly, like simultaneously, I was into the Sherlock fandom. So I was just the Sherlock of the Super Hulock, but I was like, I had the boy band track and the queer bait Sherlock track at the same time. God bless
This
my
is so
parents.
interesting, Kate, because I have told Amanda and Lauren before, one of my best friends is in a boy band. He's quite famous in the Hispanic world, and I've seen fan fiction about him and other members of the boy band, and I've seen the behavior of some fans. Some fans have tried to get me to share personal information with them and all of that. So I've always found it to be a fascinating phenomenon, especially when my students are like, "Oh, you know them? Can you get me tickets to the concerts?" And I'm like, "No, I can't."
No,
Like,
I
no.
don't even like you that much.
And also, sometimes I don't get tickets, you know?
Right?
My first fandom was Harry Potter.
Uh,
I was very autistically attached to it,
mhm.
so I probably read the books at least 3 times. Each book, maybe more. I knew everything about it, everything. And there was this platform that was like some sort of like role playing platform for like a virtual Hogwarts that was for the Hispanic world. It was called Harry Latino,
Ooh.
and it was in Spanish because I didn't. I became able to communicate in English at 19, so a lot of the fandoms were closed for me.
Yeah.
But this had like a huge presence in Latin America and Spain, so you would like be a student at Hogwarts and enter chat rooms that were like the Commons room, the be called blah blah blah. You will even like have clubs inside it. There will be like blogs for fan fiction. So every single like, and this was the only way I could engage with fandom, because my parents were very knowledgeable of the risks of the internet for little kids. So they liked this site because this site was very like PG-13. There were like very strict rules on how you could engage with people, and they felt like I was protected. So we will have like Christmas balls and Halloween balls, and it was all chat, you know?
Yeah, no,
There
I
would be
love that.
tournaments. They had a radio, so you could like make your own song about Harry Potter and send it to the
I
radio.
love it.
And then my poor mother was subjected to listening to a lot of people who could not hold a note for 2 hours in the car, singing rewritten known songs with lyrics changed to like
Harry
football
Potter.
characters.
I love
So
it. I love it.
it was fascinating. I think that's like my biggest experience with fandom, and it's very sad how it ended for me.
Yeah,
And I recently gave up all of my Harry Potter stuff because I felt they were cursed.
yeah, no, same.
So that was my
Mhm.
first fandom, and I think that plus I was briefly engaged in the Twilight fandom here in Bogota, only because my mom had like a writer friend who was friends with the publisher who was bringing Twilight to Latin America, and I had actually been like the founder of a fan club for another like Spanish author that was coming to Colombia, just because they needed someone who read, and they were like, you, because you know someone who knows someone. And then that's how I got tickets to Twilight stuff. But my Twilight frenzy lasted for like 4 months. So
Yeah,
yeah, I am
yeah,
more present in fandoms right now than I was when
yeah,
I was a teenager, actually,
yeah.
besides Harry Potter.
Yeah, what you're like talking about, like the early kind of like chat room style fan
Yeah.
fiction, is like really how fandom like started on the internet. Like you had things like LiveJournal, which was like a
Mhm.
blogging website, like
Mhm.
early Tumblr. You had like private servers. You had like just servers where people would like role play the whole time
You
as
just unlocked a
characters.
memory. I think I just lied to you. I totally forgot that I was like a Warrior Cats like role player in like
Oh my
fifth and
god!
sixth grade. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Wait. Okay,
Wait.
do you know the podcast Normal Gossip?
Mm-mm.
Okay, highly recommended to everyone. It's a great podcast, but they do have an episode. This is like
On Warrior Cats.
people submit gossip and they anonymize it and tell
Wait,
it to
wait, I've
guests.
seen a clip of this Warrior Cats.
Yeah. And there's one episode on like a fan club of Warrior Cats, and of people who write fan fiction, but there was like a hierarchy inside the club. And so you could only like go up in the hierarchy if you had like someone very powerful in the club inserted in your fan fiction and stuff like that. It was fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah, because a lot of people, like this would have been, I was in sixth grade, it would have been like circa 2006, 2007.
Mhm.
Like people would make websites off of like,
Yeah.
I think it was like free web, like the thing to like role play in the chat rooms, and you would pretend to be a cat and you activate voice in text. I was like, wait a minute, no, I totally did that.
No, yeah, and like this is how fandom was early conceived. Like you would be in AOL chat rooms, you would be
Kick chat rooms.
you would be on your own website, you would be LiveJournal was huge. Like Archive of Our Own didn't start till 2008, and it was basically because like, hey, fandom is everywhere. What if we started centralizing things? And what if we were also able to write RPF? And what if we also RPF is real person fiction? And what if we also didn't give a shit what Anne Rice was saying about the character? Because
de Lyoncourt.
Yeah, no, the
He
real
has
reason
seen
Archive of Our Own
terribly.
started was because they were like, we hate Anne Rice and the fact that she said we can't write fan fiction about her fans or about her stuff. But no, my first fandom, like I definitely participated in a Harry Potter fandom. I was on Fiction Alley. I was there when Cassandra Clare was there doing her racisms. Her well documented racisms.
We are that age.
But I would say like the first fandom that was like a really big fandom for me was One Direction. Like I wrote fic, I wrote
We were at
RPF.
the same time.
Yes. I wrote RPF. I ran a 1D updates blog on Tumblr. Like I've seen stuff recently that would have gone triple platinum on my 1D updates blog. Like I would have been the most popular person on the internet. I had a Tumblr. Like I was all over that. I saw One Direction like when Big Time Rush, they opened for Big Time Rush. Like
I was there.
like
I remember that show.
and you know what? You can all come for me in the comments, but I'm that cool, okay? I was there before Harry Styles was who he is today, okay?
Yep.
I used to know him when he was Haza, okay?
They were on iCarly.
Before that.
Yeah, before I can. You just unblocked a memory now for me, just like I did for Kate. So my other fandom was, there was this TV producer in Argentina that has produced, like, my mom used to watch something produced by them when she was a teenager. You know, like, this is very prominent in Latin America. They're like I don't know if there still are, but they were like the big boss of teenage telenovelas and kids telenovelas. And I forgot the name of the whole like producer, but the main thing that got me into this was Floricienta, that became like this huge phenomenon, to the point where you had a Brazilian Floricienta, a Colombian Floricienta, because the Floricienta from Argentina was so like this big thing, to the point where the main character's marriage to like the Prince Charming, you know, like the Galan, was produced live on a stadium with people, like a concert, and it was a huge thing. And they still do like 10-year, 20-year anniversary concerts with like the big names, and they later produced, like, Floricienta was very tame, kid friendly. Disney Channel got the rights for like the rest of Latin America, and then they got Teen Angels. Teen Angels, usually how these programs worked is what you were following like a story, but in the story there was a music group, so you will get music as well to buy, and you will go to concerts. So Teen Angels was the band, and Casi Angeles was the show. And that for me was like huge, because it was the first time that I saw a show talking about sex education, about consent, but it was messy. It was toxic and it was messy. And one of my first sapphic crushes is Lali Esposito, who grew up in those telenovelas. Like, she started at 4 years old as an actor, and teenagers she was like 19, 18 by the end, I think. She's now like this very like huge musician and actress in Argentina.
That.
So that was like huge.
It was like your Degrassi.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Exactly. It was my like Degrassi. Yeah.
Okay, Amanda.
And that's
young one.
That's where Rebelde, I don't know if you know about the phenomenon that was RBD and Rebelde in Mexico, but it's actually a remake. Like, this was a huge telenovela and band in Mexico that I think is like the model for stuff like Elite right now. But it was actually a remake of one of the Argentinian thing, because Rebelde Way, the original one, was like in the 90s and early 2000s.
All right.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you. That was very cool. I like the international lens.
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll be linking all of these in our show notes so we can.
Yes. Which also I want to shout out to our listeners. Please share with us your first fandoms. I want to know. Yes. I'm so curious where else y'all.
Yeah, because I feel like we'll talk. Anyway, you know what? Amanda go first, and
then. I'm so excited. I'm sitting here like rocking, fucking tweaking, wanting to talk about fucking fandoms so bad. Because growing up, I was made fun of for like wanting to be in fandoms or wanting to engage in this and all of this, but as I've said before, and I think I've really attached as my like special interest and my like favorite thing in the world is Percy Jackson. That's my ride or die. That is like my number one, my first and last, like my one and only. Like, Percy Jackson is my thing.
We have Percy Jackson books holding up the mic right now.
I have a Percy Jackson. I have a See With Brain podcast merch. Right.
That's how Amanda and Lau met, is
Yeah.
through a
Yeah.
podcast that they listened to about Percy Jackson.
I like.
So because I am younger, I remember when the Harry Potter hype started, and I was like not really into reading at the time. I was like, those books are big. I was in like second or third grade. I don't really know. And then I found Percy Jackson, and I was like, I'm not like other kids. And I was like, all these stupid people are reading Harry Potter, and I'm gonna read this other one. And I fell in love. I was probably, if I was in third or fourth grade, that was like, I don't know, somewhere around the 2008 election, maybe a little after, maybe towards 2010s, in that realm, until the second series started coming out, and I hopped in annually around Son of Neptune, which is the second book, whatever. And that's a whole other discussion. But I was also in the early stages of Instagram. Like, I was on Instagram like within the first couple of years that it came out, and also Facebook pages, because my parents let me get a Facebook really young.
Wow.
I don't remember what lie I told them I wanted one for, but I ended up running both a Facebook and Instagram account for Percy Jackson fan pages that also had role play. So I would email with this random girl I found online. I don't even remember her name, but she had curly red hair. I remember that. And we adminned this old Instagram. It was before you could easily switch accounts. You had to like manually log out and log in. This is so 2011. And we would like make edits and be like, okay, like this, I'm so and so. We would have like this special denotation for whoever was admin. Like people would be in the comments replying. I was in different chat rooms being like whatever, Annabeth, whatever situation. That was a whole thing. And then in my middle school years, I got into Super Hulock, so I wasn't just Supernatural, I was into all of Super Hulock, and I've been in so many subsequent fandoms since. I've mentioned a couple, and I won't go into all of them, but really Percy Jackson was my first one, was my OG, a little bit after y'all got into fandoms, and a little bit in like, I'd say like a middle stage internet, not like as early internet as y'all, but definitely more middle stage. But that is, and I mean, like I said, to this day, still, Percy Jackson, my number one. I'm thinking about it every day. I'm like engaging with internet fandom and going from the change to like Instagram to Tumblr to Twitter to everywhere else, seeing all the different, to TikTok even, seeing the differences in fandom has been really interesting. And especially as someone who's engaged with fandom for like so long. Like I'm sure y'all have seen that too, but like being in different spaces makes for different discussions and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting one too, because it's still going, like with the TV show and the books. So like it is a very long.
That's how I got into it. I got into it 2 years ago. So
so there's this whole new generation of people getting into it now who didn't grow up with it like we did. So we have this different perspective, because in the late 2010s, like once Trial of Apollo and afterwards, after that stuff came out, fandom was functionally gone. Like from like 2016 on, it was really, really quiet. Like every once in a while I could find like people using like Viria art, like making edits or whatever. But it really, as soon as once season 1 started getting into production with the show, that was when it like launched so hard, and it has not been off my feed for the past like what, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, and I'm so thankful. Like literally Percy Jackson was one of the reasons I never killed myself, if I'm so for real.
That's a lot. That's a sentiment that a lot of fans have.
fair.
Yeah.
Fair. But it's, and I'm so serious about that.
Yeah, so I think something that a lot of the heated rivalry fandom is getting flack of is that, like, everybody's like, oh, these people have never been in a fandom before in their life. And so, like, I want to, like, kind of talk about that. Like, have you guys encountered people, like, on threads, on Twitter, like, who are like, oh my god, this is my first time in fandom, like, what do I even fucking do? Or have you encountered people who are like, yeah, I've been in this forever, like, what, you guys don't know what you're doing?
I would say I have both, just because like I'm very active on like every social media platform for my research, for better or worse, whether it's through a fandom lens or like my professional like social media pages. I think where like my algorithm on Twitter is more like older, or at least people who have come from different fandoms, whether that's Red, White, Royal, Blue. There's a lot of like 911 fans who like merged into Heated Rivalry. A lot of like K-pop fans. I see a lot of like BTS. Too. So a lot of it was people were into the latest like queer media, and then they just got on this one because they were like, oh, another queer media. I would say I also have friends, like real friends, who she is around my age, like in her 30s, and she hasn't been in a fandom since like One Direction circa like 2013. So they were a fan, they were in online social media fandom spaces at more than a decade ago, but have since like, you know, been away from the internet, how the social etiquette and norms go, and are now getting back into it in 2026. So I would say there's a mix from at least like what my algorithm shows me, but it's varied on the platform. Like I would say
Yes.
Threads to me shows me more like older millennials and or fans who are new to fandom or getting back into it. And I think Twitter was the space where it was like people this like they've done this before. They're currently in multiple fandoms at the same time.
Yeah, I remember like early in the heated rivalry craze, like probably in the beginning of December, I saw a thread, which I'm sure I'll never be able to find for the show notes, but it was like, when was the last time we were all collectively obsessed with this? Was it Twilight? And I was like,
Really, I've been here.
I was like,
Like, I've been here the whole time.
I was like, first of all, yeah, if you were a white woman, like, did y'all not watch K-pop Demon Hunters? Did you not go through Sinners? Like those have also been huge cultural moments in the past year. I don't know what to tell you. Like, get on the internet more, I guess,
Right.
but also get off the internet and go touch grass.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand that people will take breaks off the internet or like it just doesn't reach their feed or like whatever. I've had things that I'm a fan of where it just doesn't reach my feed and so I don't engage with them that way. But I will say that I haven't seen a lot of new people to heated rivalry in a way. I've seen them like start to get into it or they don't understand like the parasocial like RPF side of it. Whereas I've engaged with a lot of like Twitch culture, and Twitch culture is very separate and another conversation that we can have about fandom. But like the RPF understanding there is a bit different in trying to like navigate these two of the like it just, like basically like don't let it get back to creators as a whole aspect of it. And I think that's where I've seen a lot of people misstep in heated rivalry is like there are some conversations that need to stay in private chat rooms and away from the public, because then you also get things where it's like, oh, I don't go here but I heard this, or I don't know them but I heard this. And that's how I feel like a lot of new people misstep, is that they just don't understand part of the etiquette.
Yeah. So very quickly, for all of the people who listen to this podcast, what is a parasocial relationship?
Oh, can I go? Because that was a big part of my master's thesis.
Yes, I would love to hear your.
Because my master's thesis was queer baiting on Sherlock and Hannibal, and that was real queer baiting. I have seen the word queer bait being tossed around like the last few months, and real people.
The last few months.
For the record,
when was Heartstopper?
Oh, that's I totally forgot about.
Yeah, that was like 3 years ago. So since then, at least.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of people like are using queer bait incorrectly, where it is
parasocial.
And somewhat parasocial, where it's like queer baiting is a term that is used in the industry in terms of media, of the producers, the showrunners, the people who are making the content intentionally hint at having two characters get together and then never do. Like that is that element. Like we can see it with Sherlock and with Hannibal until Brian Fuller actually did the thing, where real people who are like regular people, they're living their lives, whether they're celebrities or not, you cannot queer bait as a person. Like that is not a thing. And parasocial, I think, has been extrapolated, I think, since COVID. I think that was people were learning like the internet of like, oh, what else am I supposed to do? I'll start reading fan fiction, or I'll binge watch TV shows. And so the base definition like that I would use is that it is a one-sided relationship with either a fictional character or a celebrity. So that element is you do not personally know them, but your brain, like you feel like you know them. So that one-sided aspect of you feel the emotions when you engage with the fandom. It's not like, okay, I watched it and I'm done, right? Like I watched Zootopia 2 the other day and I was like, great. And then I've never thought about it again. The aspect of wanting to continue the conversation. So like the act of wanting to go on Tumblr or Twitter or read fan fiction. That is that element of I want to keep my characters alive, or I want to keep them in my brain and my heart. And I think part of it is what a lot of people may not realize, like what we're seeing is that the brain, like you personally, it is a relationship to you. Like it's not, a lot of people like it's delusional or delulu or all that kind of stuff. But these people, they are like real emotions and feelings and hormones and all that stuff of you truly think that it affects you, whether these people or the the storylines, like you really do feel it like in your heart and in your head.
And I think like a lot of the negativity is like that's associated with parasocialness, because like I think the internet co-ops like psychology terms like nobody's business and then takes them very out of context, like things like we see like how gaslighting is taken out of context, and now all of a sudden everything
Love
is
bombing.
gaslighting.
We talked
Or
about that
love
one.
bombing.
That's a
Yes.
new one, yeah.
Yeah, we talked about
Mhm.
that. Like, if somebody was, you know, like being like, is what Scott and Kit go through love bombing? And I'm like, no, that's just a relationship. Like, I think what a lot of people don't understand is that we're all engaging in parasocial relationship with this object in some way, shape, or form. It's just that, like, sometimes people take it to an extent when it, like, exits the containment field. Like, it
Right.
then becomes things like stalking, like
Yeah.
obsession,
Yeah.
and like necessarily parasocial relationships at its very heart is not that. Like, I would, you know, like, I obviously would love for Connor and Hudson to do amazing things. You know, like, I want what's best for them. I also know that they have, like, teams that know what's best for them. I know that they are, like, fully functioning humans that have bodily autonomy and, like, can make decisions for themselves. You know, I can respond to a way that, like, maybe they're walking through an airport and they're getting mobbed, and I would be like, oh, like, that's, like, not something that I would enjoy going through. That's parasocialness. Like, being like, hey, I have this feeling about them going through this, and then this is how I'm responding. That is parasocialness. And that's okay. Like, it is okay to be like, this is how I feel about this thing. It's not okay to take that another step and then impose that on the person that you are being parasocial with, or extend it even into, like, obsession or stalking.
Yeah, Lauren and I have talked about this extensively, especially relating to wanting your certain fandom object or wanting certain celebrities to hold specific opinions or values. Like, you, like, it gets a little complicated or nuanced. And trying to explain this, I was having this argument with someone that wanted to cancel Chapel Roan, and I was like really frustrated because I was like, you just don't get to, like, do that. Like, it was really hard, but, like, wanting. It's important to want people you look up to hold same values as you, and also they are separate people with separate ideologies that were raised separate from you in different cultures, and so wanting to project your own opinions onto them and wanting to cancel them for not having your own opinions, I think is parasocial. And this is stuff that Laura and I have really dissected because it's sometimes it can be hard to understand because we're such social creatures. But again, it's a one-sided relationship. Like, you yelling at them on Twitter all of the time is, like, I don't know, not going to do anything except annoy everyone. I don't know.
Yeah, and also, like, I think, like, some of this is also, like, we need to stop celebrity worship. Like, that's fucking weird. Like, that, like, we need to stop being like, Taylor Swift is the greatest thing to ever happen to music or whatever people, like, we need to stop, like, worshiping celebrities. Like, I think it's very okay to be like, yeah, I want to go see this celebrity in concert. Yeah, I want to go see this celebrity in movies or whatever. Like, I think it's totally fine to consume their content, but then to be like, I expect every single celebrity that I interact with who is, you know, raised differently from me to have the exact same values and hold those exact same values to, like, stop doing that. No, like, don't, like, that's just, it's like, I can understand, like, wanting your celebrities to have the same values as you, but stop looking up to them as, like, people to do that for you, because, like, ultimately, like, all celebrities care about is money. Like, I don't know what to tell you. That's all they care about is money. So they're never gonna say things politically because it will take money away from them. They're never going to do things that you want them to do because it aligns with your value, because they will probably lose money, and they are managed by corporations that care about them only because of the money that they produce.
Like, they are their own product as a actor or a musician, etc.
Yeah,
I think part of it too is that element of it affecting you as a person. Like, I've read some, like, stuff, you know, the last 24 hours and etc., of, like, people actually, like, feeling those emotions of, like, oh, I'm so worried for this person, and it's like, that's okay, but you shouldn't actually affect your day-to-day life. Like, it shouldn't affect your sleep habits, your eating habits, the addiction of always wanting to, like, refresh your feed to get updates. Like, that is the line of when it infiltrates back into your own life. And, like, that's what you think about, and that's what you, like, what it does to you on a day-to-day basis, like that of, like, I'm so upset on behalf of them, and it's like, you don't know them.
Right, exactly.
That's your emotional.
Yeah. I just think, like, because we in the last months, we, like, I discovered Dan and Phil. I was never in that fandom, but one of the things that drew me to them was all this conversation around parasociality, and the toxicity of fandom that I found very interesting. And I was thinking about like when you're a celebrity because of you playing a character, there's like this gray area where people like mix the character with you and their feelings for but when in this era of influencers and of
Mhm.
YouTubers, when the product is your own life, your own private life, like you are the product that is being sold, not like your acting or singing talents, but yourself, like your home, your day to day, your sleep schedule, your home, and like you're inviting people inside your life.
Mhm.
That becomes so difficult to manage. And I have friends who have gone through this, and it's terrifying because it's also like your identity is then attached to the
Mhm.
profit, to the product itself, to the sponsorships you get,
Mhm.
and to the idea these fans have of you, which eventually after 10 years you want to do something else, but your fans sometimes want the same thing from you, the same
Right.
vlogs, the
Mhm.
same pictures, the same posts, the same frequency of posting. So I think we're in an era where those things are really getting to a point where seeing the line that
Yeah.
divides you, like the fiction I have or the narrative I have of this person who's actually performing for me,
Yes.
like they are very, like they could be very different once the
Yes.
cameras are off, because we perform. Like I am not the persona that I created for this podcast. When we have to interact with so many people, you're like eh.
No,
So
literally.
and I think a lot of people lack that perspective. This is something I love to talk about with my students when they ask, like, do you have concert tickets and can you tell me something about this or this member of the band? It's like you're consuming their music, you're not consuming their lives.
Mhm.
So this is very important for you to understand. And of course the industries see the profit in all of this. So
Right.
now Hollywood, the music industry, everyone is like trying to make actors and singers to also be like on the influencer side of
Yes.
things with what they put out, and maintaining one's privacy becomes very difficult. So I think this discussion is very important to have in
Yeah.
fandoms right now.
And I think this is also, it leads us in like two really good directions that I will try to remember both of them in my head. The first is like the prevalence of RPF, which
Mhm.
I want to get into talking about real person fiction because it's
Same.
everything to me. But I think the other direction this takes us into is like people, like especially with Hudson and his girlfriend like having more of a
Mm-hmm.
public like facing thing. Like I think this also leads us to a conversation there, and Francois and Connor and all of that kind of like side. So let's go RPF first, and then let's go to Francois, Connor, Hudson, Hudson's girlfriend, all of that.
Yeah. I'll kick us off and y'all can like back me up academically. But I feel like I didn't know about RPF, which again, real person fiction. I didn't know about RPF until I got into Twitch streamers and Twitch culture in early 2020s ish, pandemic ish times. I was not into DSMP. I want to make that so clear. I was never into DSMP. I am familiar with the creators surrounding it. I was aware of the drama, but I was not into DSMP. But which if you don't know, it's fine. But if you know, you know. But I started getting into other Twitch creators, which Twitch is like streaming like YouTube and stuff. I didn't know. And I was watching these creators who had characters, and they would create these characters and role play and whatever. And I was reading fan fiction, or I was started getting involved in the fandom about these creators or about these servers they were on, like these interactions they were having, especially across cultures. And then I started seeing people ship the creators themselves, and that was when I first found about RPF, where they're, especially because you are actively watching these people portray these characters. It's not just like they're acting on a TV screen in your home. They're like on your laptop, and you can type in their chat, and it is a very direct communication. Send them money with bits and talk to them, and they'll answer your questions, and it's a very direct line of communication, which, as we've said, can breed parasocialism. And so, which I don't know if parasocialism is a word, but I'm using it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah, it is. We use it.
So I've seen people, it became this whole discussion over the pandemic in the early 2020s, at least from my involvement with fandom, about RPF and where the lines are with these creators and their boundaries, because they're people too. And so they would say like, don't ship me with people. And like I've seen creators end friendships with their friends because they kept getting shipped with them and were uncomfortable with it, and fans were just so relentless with it. And so I thought it was like taboo, and I thought RPF was very taboo. And it was like, oh, don't talk about them like that, and they're just friends, or they're more siblings, and you have to talk about their characters like this and that. And it was like very heavily policed and very like not violent, but like as socially violent as you can be, especially when you get into like those kinds of communities that can get toxic, that where it's like people just don't understand boundaries or lines, especially when you can have cultural differences. And so then hopping into the heated rivalry fandom and seeing people like casually talk about it, or like have a very different perspective on it, where they joke about the like Hudson Connor and his, Hudson's girlfriend being like a throuple, like whatever, his this is my boyfriend's boyfriend type memes. And I was like, whoa, didn't know y'all were like so cool like that, because I just didn't. To me, it was taboo, and I was like, y'all are playing fast and loose with this, because it can be very hurtful to people, and I've seen relationships fall apart because of it. So, I think it's really interesting. And then I have seen people on Twitter in replies be like, yo, like, cut it out, like, you know, keep it behind closed doors. People in our server, we've talked about that, of the, like, don't let it get back to the actors, don't let it get back to the creators. So I feel like it is that more conversation of, like, open and closed spaces. But even then, like, in some communities, I feel like RPF is so taboo, and I've read some RPF, I'm not gonna lie, and it was, like,
Oh,
fun.
I've read so much RPF.
Yeah,
Well, I was gonna say, like,
I feel a little guilty about it, but, like, I guess I don't have to, you know?
Right. I think a good jumping off point with that is I think it really depends on a fan's journey of where they came from, whether or not RPF was taboo in previous fandoms or not. And I think it also depends on the age of the fan currently, whether you are a teenager in your 20s, 30s, etc. Because I think for me, and like what a lot of, I think, different groups of heated rivalry fans came up the pipeline of like RPF in sports. Like for me, like the NHL, like RPF, and like Check Please. And so like that was about a decade ago. And then like the pipeline then, you know, went into heated rivalry. And so I think a lot of people on that track either are really into like F1 RPF and like other sports like that, or you were around to remember the Larry of it all.
Oh, the Larry Stylinson, which is an example of RPF going way too far. Yeah. Because RPF has a very, very storied history in fandom. It is like, it's one of the reasons why AO3 was created, because fanfiction.net, you couldn't post RPF on it. RPF is like the reason why music fandoms exist. Those are RPFs. But like, as Lau was saying, this is also a persona that we're getting. We are getting the public facing of how these people act. And we don't know how they act in private. It could be totally different. Even if we are getting fan like insights, you know, like we would watch One Direction videos of them going to cottages together and sitting around a fire pit and like singing songs with one another. Baby, that is staged.
It's
that
still
is
a persona.
Staged.
Yeah.
That is still a persona. And like, I read hockey fan fiction, like hockey RPF, like for a really long time. Like, like I read hockey RPF about the most Republican, like MAGA ass people,
and that's a whole other thing.
Like big little baby bottoms who are like have never done anything queer in their life.
I didn't know about this.
Who are like I have read, like I almost. This is horrifying of me to say. I almost was like, I like this person because of the RPF. And then I was like, no, I actually fucking
just
don't.
Just make it an OC at that point.
No, and that's the thing. It is original characters. They are original characters. And like, RPF does have like a fanon component to it, which fanon is fan-made canon. Yeah. So it's like things that fans say, like Draco like wears leather, like leather Draco, that is fanon from the Harry Potter community. Somebody said that Draco wears leather and it just took off in the fandom, right? Like, fanon is the heart of RPF, and that does not make it wrong. It's just that, like, when it breaches containment, publish RPF on AO3 and lock your fucking fanfic, okay? Yeah. Archive lock that shit, so only other people with archive accounts can read it. Do not send RPF to people that you know if they are in the RPF. Don't tag people who are in the RPF on Twitter, Tumblr, whatever. Don't tell them about it, because it's the other thing is it's not them. It's a character that we've created collectively.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, and some people are gonna be like fascinated by it. Like, I know, like, Dan and Phil like to read fan fiction. People
they're
wrote
also
about them.
a very interesting case. Like,
Yeah,
continue, but I want to keep that.
my friend that I mentioned also like laughs at it. Like, sometimes it's like something we enjoy doing. But yeah, like, because they're real people, they're gonna have different reactions to this objectification, because it is an objectification, and it becomes like so weird once it's not only like a thing that exists for the fandom, but
Yes.
the measuring stick that you use to decide if they're performing well or not in reality. Like,
Right.
I wish they were like in this fic. Well, that's why you have fan fiction. Like, you
Right.
write it, you imagine it, you live in that world for a few minutes, but you leave these people alone because they're real humans
No.
that
Yeah.
do not owe you like these behaviors.
Mhm.
And yeah, reaching containment.
I think there is something though where, like, I'm sure Lauren can say this too, where it's like I was reading Sid Gino fanfic, you know, like more than a decade ago.
Sorry, I
And
didn't read Sid Juno. I read
oh, you're
Austin
good.
Matthews, Mitch Warner.
Yeah. Yep.
I am
Yep. Yep.
34. Please, thank you.
But it's like I even like a decade ago, mostly because in Check Please, one of the main characters is based off of Sidney Crosby. So a lot of people who like Check Please got into the Pittsburgh Penguins and then into different NHL teams. But I never once, like in my head, actually thought or wanted Sid and Gino to actually get together. I think lately there have been cases like Dan and Phil or Tom and Zendaya, Tom Holland and Zendaya, where they actually do. And I wonder, or like trying to conceptualize, like, is that feeding into the idea of like, oh, the will they, won't they actually could? Because now we have some examples where fans ship them together. Like, I remember the homecoming era of Spider-Man, and like where they were like, you know, I'm just friends, and everyone's like, Zendaya, you're laughing way too hard at this white man, etc. And so them seeing like, oh, they actually got together and everything we thought we saw was actually real. I think, yeah, I think it does set this precedent of we have case studies now where it did happen, and I think that has changed.
I think it's really funny because I keep encountering like fan fiction where it's like Holinov shippers in the fan fiction are on hockey Twitter.
I do
and
like
they're
those.
like, I am not crazy. And everybody's
Right?
like, no, you're actually fucking crazy because it's obviously Shaden. And then like 10 years later, Holinov comes out and they're like, I wasn't crazy. I love those fics because those are so funny to me. But I think this also gets into like talking about like fandom etiquette, which I think a lot of people are like maybe not aware of. Like, I learned fandom etiquette through what we like to call in fan studies big name fans. So these are like people who would say, hey, I am in charge, or I created this server, or I created this live journal, and I'm really popular in the fandom because I write really popular fics, or I do a lot of the work in the like back behind scenes of this fandom particularly, and I get to dictate what you can and can't say, what you can and can't do. So when Lau was talking about what is the Cats show, whatever it was,
Warrior Cats?
Yes, like that rule where you had to put a person in a fic, that is a rule from a big name fan. Like, and so like that's how fandom etiquette was told to me, and it was like never tag the actual celebrity in the RPF. Always lock your fics on archive of our own. Never share archived like locked fics on social media platforms. Like don't like link drop, which I think is a huge problem in the heated rivalry fandom, but we'll get into that, I'm sure. And then like the other big one was like the prevalence of like tagging in your fics and how much you need to tag and what you need to tag for specifically. Things like not like beyond the archive warnings, like beyond major character death or rape non-con or underage or graphic depictions of violence. Like things that you always should tag for are like self-harm or like gore or violence in some way, shape, or form, or like abuse of any kind, and things like I'm seeing more of a trend of like tagging for things like racism, disability, ableism,
Mm-hmm.
like sexism, all of those isms coming in, and political stuff too.
Yeah.
And that's just, I think, like some like lessons that have been imparted on me for, you know, the 20 plus years that I've been in fandom, that I think a lot of new fans in Heated Rivalry are maybe not super aware of.
Yeah.
And I think I've also seen like, and it was more prevalent, and then it took a break, and now like a lot of, I'm trying to think who they're talking about, like a specific author who most likely used AI, and like talking about that conversation of like a very popular fic, like do they use it or not? And I think part of it is they want to treat AO3 like a social media platform and try to like manipulate an algorithm, and it's like that's not how this works.
Yeah.
Like the idea of we tag because it's an archive and there are specific things that we do versus like, oh, I don't want to spoil anything, and it's like, well, you're not spoiling, you are helping people be able to filter out certain things that they don't want to read about. And same with like, I've seen people trying to change like or backdate or change the update, so if people go by sort like date updated, it'll be on the first page, and it's like, why do we care about a first, like there's no first page on AO3.
No,
like that's not how this works.
Yeah, I started today, and I think I'm gonna finish it after we hang up because it's fascinating. I started Gabriela Papadaki's The Ice Skater memoir. It finally got to me because it's not available in Colombia yet. So I had someone who brought it to me from France. And it's fascinating how she was like coached to, and she and everyone coached, everyone in like the pair skating situation was coached to tailor a very like engaging history of how their relationship as skaters was. So in her case, it was not like a romance because Guillaume Ciceron, who I don't like, was openly queer. So it was mostly like the narrative that was curated by coaches and PR people. But like this inseparable friends that met when they were like 10 years old and now like will go everywhere together, whereas in reality, as soon as training was done, they would go their separate ways because they did not get along. And he was super abusive towards her in an exploitative way, not in a sexual way. And but I had to stop just when I was reading that. And I think all of this, like, what is very unfair, I think, is that, so Kate, you were saying like, yeah, and now we're assuming like because Zendaya and Tom Holland and Dan and Phil are together and we got confirmation of our theories, that's so unfair for these people, you know, like I know they benefit economically from all this frenzy, but I also know like this is not something they signed up for when they started. And I think it's unfair from fans to expect this to happen now that it has happened twice. It's unfair to like also make them responsible for like living their truth. So now everyone is like, but why did you come out now? I have to come out, blah blah blah. But also so unfair from the industry to use this as a hook. And and it's fascinating and terrifying at the same time to see how more and more industries use this and blur the lines between what is public and what is private in order to sell. And I think we're seeing that a lot in this fandom, but it's not unique to this fandom.
Right.
The way, like, if we see it even in ice skating, you know, like, you want to see this couple and you want to imagine that they're in love forever or have this amazing chemistry, and some of them hate each other. They're just good at what they do. So and you can see that in bands, you can see that in actors, you can see that even in influencers that stay working together even though they hate each other. Because it sells.
Yeah, I mean, Fleetwood Mac is like the biggest example.
Yep.
I think this is also like really great to talk about the like overt racism that like Hudson is experiencing. So we've talked about it a little bit on the pod, but Hudson went through like has been going through basically since he was, you know, named Shane Hollander, and saying about a racism in his comments. What happened recently was Francois had commented on something of Hudson's on Instagram. A bunch of people responded to it with like really vitriolic racist shit, and Francois and Hudson then released a statement together that they both put on their story. And we've talked about this before, but like something Francois said was like, oh, we all decided that we weren't going to address it. We were just going to ignore it. Now, that was not the cast's decision. That was not the creators' decisions. That was the media companies that control these people's decisions. They said, don't say anything because excluding any fans results in less money for us, right? It's all, unfortunately, about capital.
Yeah.
And you can love it as much as you want, but the thing is they are trying to sell you a product, and like by like there is so much just like shit that is like, oh, Francois and Connor are dating, I don't like Francois, like I don't like this, I don't like that. Like all of this is getting you to engage with this object even more and getting you to spend more money on this object. And I don't think that is a wrong thing to point out, nor is it a reason why you stop watching Heated Rivalry or stop consuming this content. I think this content has a lot more to it than just its advertisement of capital, but I think we all need to be more aware of that, and that also leads me into talking about how this fandom doesn't have any fucking media literacy.
True.
Very true.
This fandom in general, like we have a crisis in our hands, you know, like
when Lauren messaged me again, I had said like, oh, in the past 24 hours, you know, this happened. And the last time we talked was like March 10th. And I had mentioned of like, oh, like especially what happened like in the last few days. I couldn't even remember what I was referencing of like 3 crises ago. And I had to go back on my timeline to be like, what was it? And it was the Francois and Hudson shared thing. Because I was like, we've already been through like 3 others.
Yeah.
3 others. This fandom is like speed running all of
I've never seen a show like speed run this fast.
Yeah.
Like through the milestones of a fandom that usually takes 5 years. And I think that is, I think, correlated with the spike of Hudson and Connor's fame, where a lot of the industry people say like this type of 0 to 100 is not the norm, right? Like they would get a little popular and then a little more popular, and they're experiencing what would be like a 5-year journey in 4 months. And so like I think the fandom is then inherently also like speed running some of the like milestones that we, you know, as scholars like typically see in like a long-term fandom.
Yeah, because I do remember this amount of vitriol towards some actors. Like, for example, in Harry Potter, I remember like fans spreading rumors about Evanna Lynch not liking Emma Watson and taking sides. And as you were like 14, you will like probably believe it, you know, like, and then you grow up and see. But the amount of coverage and how instantaneous the content is, it's making it spread like fire.
Yeah.
And this was a phenomenon that like it just exploded from one day to the other. Their fames, as you were saying as well. So it's very overwhelming, even as a fan. I cannot imagine what it is for someone who is involved in the project.
Like actual actors.
Yeah. But as a fan, I'm like, there's so much I can't keep up. Like I can keep up with all the scandals, I can keep up with all the rumors, I can keep up even with the good things. It's like there's so much. Like, how many guest appearances are we getting at this point? How many interviews do I have to watch?
Yeah.
So it's very overwhelming.
Like, I don't know what to tell you guys. Slow down, please. Please. Like, and I've been talking about this with my therapist because I've been going through a lot of like my anxieties about social media, I think, especially being like a social media and fandom scholar, and not only loving this object but also researching this object and doing a fan podcast on this object, like just having a lot of this content being consumed all of the time and being like, I literally like I get on the internet and I'm like, what is the problem today? Like, it's not even like holding any more joy. And like, to me, something that like really fucking freaked me out was like the fandom got so upset over the Hudson racism thing, and then literally the next day I got on Threads and everybody was like back to like cottage posting, like it was totally normal. Like I was like, are we just gonna like ignore all of that stuff that happened? Because like there are fans of color who who are like deeply impacted by this, who are deeply impacted by like the fandom not wanting to talk about racism, uplifting constantly white voices. Like I have friends of color who are like friends of color, Jesus Christ. Like I have a black friend. No, I'm just kidding. Like I have friends who are like, I don't participate in this fandom anymore because
I
it's
have
all
gay
white people.
friends, you know?
I have gay friends.
I can't be homophobic. I have gay friends.
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
What are you
I
talking
have
about?
a wife. I have a black lesbian wife. Like, hello.
Hello? Hello? You can't be homophobic.
Right?
No, and so like
as the wife of
No, yeah,
no, it's just
literally.
like this fandom is like and it's like almost like I think there are a couple of reasons for this, and I'm sure Kate and I can like hypothesize and theorize, and I'm sure we'll have a paper come out of this at some point. But
Well, I wanted to talk about that specifically in a second.
yeah, Dim and Fiesler, Casey Fiesler and Brianna Dim have written about the like death of fan platforms and like the way that fan content is like all of a sudden everywhere in a way that it didn't used to be. And I've also written about this because of the Tumblr porn ban that happened in like 2018 and 2019, which was a direct result of the stopping online sex trafficking, fighting online sex trafficking laws in the United States, and how that kind of resulted in a lot of fans turning to other social media platforms that are more visible, like Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, to put out fan content, which then just makes it even more visible to other media pieces. And like, I'm sure, Kate, you and I have read the same New York Times think pieces on, you know, fandom and how it's ruining everything and like all of this bad stuff. And I am by no means saying that like this fandom is beautiful, like super liberatory space. I've specifically written how it's not.
Right.
But I think that like the death of like fan platforms like LiveJournal, Tumblr, and also the sequestering of like Black and brown fans and Indigenous fans wanting to keep their peace and wanting to stay away from crazy white fans and going to more like closed off platforms like Mastodon or Discords or whatever, curating their fandom a little bit more. I think that has also driven this fandom to be like even more crazy. And I mean, like, you know, TikTok is a huge influence on this, especially with like book talk as well.
Yeah, and even like the changes in Twitter as Elon took over and how people left a major fandom space for like over a decade to go to like either Blue Sky or Threads or just off the internet or to TikTok or back to Tumblr, like in like this just splintering of fandoms that way, and those different like kind of personalities that came with them in general. How like we see people on Threads who maybe have a bit of like the Twitter personality, but are still like are a bit different of like the argumentative side of things. But TikTok is just also, I feel like, people who don't have literacy skills. Like there's just all these different little personalities and critiques that each of them brings, and even as different medias. And I think that the death of a platform or the restructuring of a platform is so critical, especially as algorithms change, and then relevant conversations about like AI and the rise of bots and etc.
And even like the crazy amount of censorship that our platforms go through as well. Like especially TikTok right now is going through like a whole reworking and is very highly censored in the United States.
Yep.
And like, you know, how Twitter doesn't have Brazil fans on it anymore, does it? Is it
really back? But like, did they come back?
Are they back? Yeah.
You know, or like not interacting with like Chinese fans because they're not allowed on AO3, literally. You know, like there is just like this huge like also looming sphere of censorship over all of this that is also impacting our algorithms and how we consume the content, and also then our media literacy. Like the amount of people I've like had to fight with on the internet about stupid stuff is killing me. It's killing me.
Yeah, people don't read.
No. Well, like how you know the leaks of like different group chats of people, and how a lot of them truly were taking people's statements at face value and be like, yeah, obviously you're not lying. Like I believe you full-heartedly. And it's like, no, because anybody can say anything. Anyone can have an avatar and a bio. You can just make one. And it's like that inherent trust that I think a lot of people who were in fandoms before this are like, what are you doing? Like, you're missing that literacy, like privacy, security element to protect yourself.
Right, and I think, like, Kate, you, me, and Lau, we can sit here and be like, you know, we grew up with the internet, like, our parents were afraid of it, like,
Right. Like, I was on DeviantArt when I wasn't supposed to.
Oh, I was on Tumblr when I was definitely not supposed to be, but that was
Yeah.
really important to my understanding of like identity and critical thinking and how I interacted with things, because people in their 20s and 30s were like dissecting all of these characters and all of these things, and that gave me such insight into like how to operate in these spaces. And then of course the like all the infographics about like what is being asexual, and I was like, oh wow, like everything is so much more broad than I thought it was, and my mind as a little 12-year-old is exploding.
yeah,
It's a canon event.
yeah, and I think, like,
Sorry, death of an author.
death of the author. Hey, just kidding. And you know what?
I did want to bring up with you, Lauren, specifically, because I think we're in a really weird position, and a lot of fan scholars have talked about this, of being a scholar and a fan of the object that you are studying. And I'm just super busy because of like I'm currently dissertating and like all that life stuff. And I saw recently there was a call for papers about heated rivalry, and I was like, oh, I really want to do it, but I actually don't want to do it. And this like okay, so again, my dissertation about Superman, for a year I manually collected tweets with fans. So like I bookmarked over 1,000 tweets over the course of a year of fans talking to each other about discourse and talking about James Gunn, right? And it's literally like I could be doing the same thing for heated rivalry right now, or using my research knowledge to look at the heated rivalry fandom from a scholarly lens. But what my dissertation has done to me, and I knew this was most likely going to happen, but my love for DC, my love for Superman, my love for Batman and the Bat Fam and that kind of stuff, because it is work, it now feels like work. Like I feel like I can't watch a movie or the animated TV show or whatever of DC because it feels like work now, that I have to look at it with an academic lens. Even the comics, it's hard for me. And so me discovering heated rivalry from a fan first, I'm like, I don't want to academicize, that's not a word, but you know what I mean? I don't want to turn my personal fun thing that I do for me into work, even though it is literally what I study. And so like balancing that idea of like, how much do I bridge the two together? Do I just not do anything, even though academically it would be perfect and I could probably publish something? It's like that, the duality of like being a fan and a fan scholar at the same time.
I'm not a fan scholar, Kate, but I survive a PhD.
Yes.
And in literature, you know, my favorite hobby is to read. And it took me a year to get into reading again. And what got me into reading again was Percy Jackson, because it was like super, like I study Caribbean literature, you know, like it was definitely not the same. And then like I got into this podcast fandom that where I met Amanda, and we have a book club. But if you ever need advice on how to shake this post dissertation ick, because you get an ick, like I'm like, and now I was telling Lauren this last time, like I have very clear boundaries of which type of content I consume where. Like iPad is for job, so papers, books that I have to review, things I read for like planning my classes, and my Kindle is my safe space of books that I can read without having to say anything intelligent about it. But it was like a whole year of developing that, and I do think that mixing what you love with your job has that tricky aspect to it.
For sure. And I mean, like, Kate, like you and I have talked about this, but like I didn't write anything scholarly for like a year and a half after I got my PhD. Like I was like, I literally like cannot actually like I was traumatized by my PhD. Like it is a very
traumatizing.
Like you have to you're constantly under like a microscope of being approved. Like, is my work worth it? Is it going to make an impact? Like it is a very draining, exhausting process. And I mean, I think like something like I'm even finding, because I keep getting in fights with people on threads, which these two know very well. But even when I'm like, hey, no, like I have a PhD in fandom studies, I study fan fiction, let me show you guys how I think about this media. People are like, you're not an expert just because you have a PhD. And I'm like,
Bro.
Like that's kind of what that means.
That's
That
kind
is
of what that means, unfortunately.
That's kind of what yeah.
What I mean, like, that's what I, like, that's my life's work. Like, and so I think I can maybe be like, hey, like, here are the things that I'm seeing this fandom do, or this thing do, or, you know, and I think there is just, like, this absolute need to fight with people on the internet. Like, everybody's opinion is wrong. Listen, everybody has an opinion. They're like assholes. Like,
right.
they all stink.
I think one of the things that helped me is when I got into DC, because I was using my professional Twitter, like my default Twitter, to collect the data, is I made like a fake persona for like fandom. So I made like a fake name and an email. So then every like fan like Twitter or like my Tumblr was like on a separate account where I had to like log into it. And I think that has helped somewhat of like this account algorithm is like just heated rivalry. It is the email that like updates from AO3 come to, etc. So it's like two separate like Twitter profiles almost. And I think that has helped a little. But I think again that idea of like wanting to have fun and kind of take your, you know, scholarly hat off just to enjoy a thing is like very different. And I think again like my love for DC has changed, and I want it to get back to where, you know, why I got into it into the first place. And it's hard to be like, okay, like I will enjoy it for fun.
But I think that's also like, I think that like there is this like movement, I think, in fandom, and I'm sure we'll talk about it whenever we do a podcast on fan fiction, but it's like this whole idea of like, well, if you don't like it, then don't interact with it. Like, we've talked about on this podcast, like the need for critique, especially as we enter into a fascist society, and like the need to dissect the media that you are consuming and not just swallow whatever people are hand feeding you. That there is like this need to be like, okay, let's problematize this. Like, let's talk about this object in different ways. And I mean, like, that's like the purpose of this podcast is, you know, we love this object. And I think there is like, I go back to the things that I read for my dissertation. I still love those objects. You know, I'm still keeping up with the boys. I'm, you know, it's been a few years. I've been able to distance myself a little bit. But I think there is, you know, like this idea that like, oh, I just want to enjoy it for fun. I think you can still do that and still critique it and be like, hey, I think this is an issue. Like, I think we should talk about this. I think this is where this can go. Because then, you know, we get like what Rachel Reed is doing with Unrivaled, where she's like, I saw the fan feedback that like I don't do enough with Shane's race. And I think that's really important. And I'm sorry that I haven't done that. And I'm going to do that in the future, you know?
Yeah.
And so
kind of like Rick, I forgot how to pronounce his last name, but the Percy Jackson, where he was like, older books, you know, were a product of its time. And since then, I have grown, and now in new books, I get to like play and expand on things. Like with Shane, you have the trifecta of race, autism, and an eating disorder, and a lot of it is like, can we get some more stuff? Can we just a little?
Can we get some more? Can we
get some character development?
Can you like your character just a little bit, maybe, please?
Just a little.
Please.
Could we maybe?
And so, like, I think there is like not only room for the source material to grow, but also for the fandom to grow. I think like people just need to be, and like there is like a lot of just blatant homophobia in this fandom,
which is like hello,
which is crazy. Yeah,
like there is a lot of fetishization of gay men, which I think is also crazy. I think like people need to start being more critically aware of the media that they are consuming and listen to the people who have the experiences that your characters are going through when they say, hey, this is kind of fucked up, like let's talk about this, you know, like it's kind of fucked up that they don't really address Shane's eating disorder. I've had an eating disorder. This is what I went through. Or I am a gay man in hockey. I want to like participate and consume this fandom. Don't kick me out of these spaces. Like, I think there is a lot of room for growth in the fandom, and I think there needs to be a desire to want to grow and to like trust people who have the experience, because it's the thought that I was thinking of earlier. There is in society, especially in the United States right now, this immediate distrust of academics, of people who have gone through things, of people who are seen as, you know, maybe doctors or like they are like a specialist, or experts, let's quote unquote say.
Yeah.
I think there is this distrust because of how the government treats those people and how nobody in the government is an expert at anything.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be a re-education of the people to trust those people again. And like, unfortunately, that's going to take time. It's not going to be solved overnight. But what Heated Rivalry fans can do, or what other fans can do, is to like push for that.
Yeah.
I am curious because one of the critiques I've seen from particularly gay men is that the season 1 didn't talk enough about the racism in the NHL or that kind of stuff. And a lot of people are like, oh, like it's coming, like book 2, book 6, 2, whatever, we'll talk about it. And I'm curious how once the show presents the long game, how the fandom will react to it and like engage in the discourse that is already in the show. Bringing to the discourse with discourse, but because the long game has a lot of those elements, I'm really curious to see how the fandom will grow from season 1 to season 2.
Yeah, and I mean, we've kind of talked about this a little bit on the podcast. We might, maybe in the future, maybe we'll be talking about it more, but I think that the show has a lot to do. I was, a little upset with the way that race was portrayed because I'm an NHL fan and I know how Black and brown NHL players are treated and how they are not given opportunities. And the fact that Shane is given all of these opportunities would literally never happen in the NHL. It wouldn't. Like, this is a world that Rachel Reed has made up. Like, there are Asian players now who are not given the opportunities because of their Asianness. Like, why else? They are great players. Why are they missing out on these things except for the fact that they are not white? Yeah. And so I think that there is going to be a little bit of a reckoning with some of these white people who don't recognize racism outside of overt racism, like saying the N-word or saying slurs, who don't understand that covert racism, who did crop up when Hudson was having racial issues, and we're like, why can't we all just be friends? And I was like, oh my. And it's like, are you gonna start being like, I don't see color?
Like, I thought we all went through 2020 and had these discussions together, but I guess some people just weren't there for that.
No, it's not even that they weren't there for it. They were there for it. They just haven't thought about it since then. Right. Because it hasn't been in their face like that was.
Yep.
So I think that kind of wraps up our discussion on fandom. I think there's a lot of room to grow. I mean, we'll continue talking about this. Kate, thank you so much for coming on to this podcast recording. We loved having you. Do you have anything that you would like for us to plug, or would you like to plug anything right now?
I'm mostly just active on my professional Twitter, which is at the Kate Pryor, mostly because like that's where I do a lot of my DC like reposting and stuff. And I did want to plug, just last year my first journal article was published. Yay. And it's about fan fiction, which I think is a really cool element where I use like 3 different methods to confirm a theory that I had. And I think the idea of fractured fandoms in different spaces where I looked at 2 different parts of a fandom who read similar things but like different, very like morale different, and how that I think like a lot of those things, like I mentioned before, like play a role in the Heated Rivalry fandom. And so if you're more interested in that, I will warn, it's about Spider-Man fan fiction, and it is looking at Peter and Tony's relationship, one in like an Iron Dad mentor mentee relationship versus a romantic sexual relationship between the 2 of them, and I compare and contrast the 2 and like what themes are in both or not, etc.
Yikes. But no, that's awesome. I've read it, but I'm sure these 2 are definitely going to get into it. I'm slowly dragging Lau into fan studies, very slowly.
And we all know that this came from Stucky fanfic, so I think it's a good of like going back to my roots of Marvel,
Yeah, exactly.
Did any of you read, before she purged it in December, did any of you read any other Rachel Reed fanfics? Because she had some Stucky and I think
No.
2 Superbat, and I was like, I knew she was a Superbat fan, and I saw it.
And you know what?
I did not.
I did not, but I will be
did
internet
not.
archiving that
Yeah.
as soon as possible.
Well, and you can still find the copy of Game Changer where it was still like Stucky fic. There are copies of that floating around too, if you look for it.
I love that. Well, we will be finding links to provide to in our show notes. But again, thank you so much, Kate,
Of course,
for
I'm really
being on.
glad that you invited me.
Yeah, have you.
We're so glad to have
It was
you.
so cool, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you again to Kate for coming on the podcast. We are going to kind of switch gears now. We have a lovely piece of fan mail from a new person. So we are going to go ahead and read their fan mail and do a little commentary on it and get into it. So, Amanda, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Yeah, this is from Grace from Toronto. Thank you so much, Grace from Toronto. We've been holding on to this for a hot minute. I've been very excited to read it, and I'm sorry for the delay, but here it is. Starts off, hi. JJ is from Quebec. At one point, he swears using the word calice, C-A-L-I-C-E.
Calice.
Calice. Thank you. This might be translated as shit, but literally means chalice and refers to the cup used by Catholic priests to hold wine for communion during a mass. Canadian French, in particular Quebec, has a long tradition of using explicitly religious words to swear. Some of the Tabernacle. Some of the first permanent European settlers in what we now call Canada were Catholic priests from France who wanted to convert Indigenous people, and there's a long, terrible history there. The Catholic Church was a dominant force in Quebec society and politics until the 1960s, so swearing by using religious language became very common. The word profanity or profane originally meant disdain or the sacred. JJ loves to shit talk, so it makes me happy that he's also shit talking the Catholics. He does that. So how do we know this series is Canadian? Forget the loons, consider that the Canadian government provided funding for this series, and our Prime Minister, who was a hockey goalie at Oxford University, brags about it. Link here we'll put in the show notes. And the word the word calice is in the script. Yay, Jacob Tierney, for including that nod to fantastic Quebecois swearing traditions. Check the Wikipedia page to learn more, and we'll include that link in there as well. Just to clarify, JJ says this, it's in episode 5 when he tells the Metro's locker room that Ilya did not go with his team to Nashville. It's translated as who gives a shit, which Lauren and I did watch last night.
Yeah, I love it. It reminds me of Spanish people. They use, like, the Spaniards use a lot of Catholic stuff to swear, like hostia, which means, like, how do you call the thing that you eat, like the body of Christ?
The body of Christ, the like wafer, it's
the
like,
wafer. Yes,
it's like the bread. It's a bunch of
so
different
hostia is how we call it in Spanish, and a lot of people in Spain say hostia to say like shit. We say like here we say like me cago en Dios, I shit on God. So I really appreciate, like, now I like JJ more.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I love that.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of similar to how we say like oh my God or Jesus Christ, which I know is very colloquially used across many cultures, but I thought that was really interesting, and I had no idea. I think it's like a big kind of like middle finger to a lot of it, which I think is really interesting, and like how colonialism relates to it.
Yeah.
I think is really interesting because like Indigenous people were not Catholic, even though now Catholicism is really huge in Latin cultures as a result of colonization. So I think using that in turn to be swear words is really interesting. And I'm just now thinking of it as he says this. It's like it doesn't say he just didn't go to Nashville, or he's because Shane's all like, is he sick? Is he okay? He didn't seem hurt. Like he's like all weird. Which I saw this tweet where it was like, if there was a woman in that locker room when that happened, she would have immediately
been like,
even you're asking questions and then going to text someone, like that's sus as hell. And so the fact that JJ and who else is there?
Hayden
are like, okay, fuck that guy, whatever. I think that's really funny.
As I was talking about earlier in this episode, I have read a lot of hockey RPF, and there are a lot of Quebecois hockey players who use a lot of these swear words, and so I've come across them in several fan fictions before. I always thought they were very funny because I that's where I learned tabernacle.
Which I don't even know what that
is. A tabernacle is like tabernacle.
Yeah.
It's where you like the host or like the body of Christ that's been blessed between
La hostia.
Like between masses, or like the excess go, like when you are done with mass, you put it in the tabernacle or the tabernacle. So it's like literally like it houses Jesus's body, quote unquote, in Catholicism.
What does like the curse?
It's like fuck, like
That really, to me, that feels like I appreciate it, but it still feels like a little random. Like I love profanity and the etymology of different profane words.
Yeah, but
That's
it.
really
Listen,
interesting.
for example, in Spain, the way that hostia became a thing, I think I might be wrong because I have people from Spain in my family, but I might be wrong. They used to say me cago en la hostia, I shit on the hostia. So, and that it starts to like be shorter and shorter to the point where you're saying just hostia.
Yeah,
So that might be what this
Yeah.
case is about, like tabernacle de merde, ou quelque chose comme ça, something like that, and it becomes tabernacle. This is just a thesis I have. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, language sometimes does that. Like you start with something very elaborate, and it becomes shorter and shorter until
Yeah.
it makes less sense than before.
Yeah, they also have the word for baptism, the word for pyx or ciborium, which is like it's a receptacle in which the host is stored. It's usually like very ornate. Christ, which is Christ. Osti, host.
I've heard people say Christ on a stick, which feels very.
I say Christ on this.
I have said it before in my times of dire.
No, my
They
favorite
say-
is Jesus Christ on a motorbike. Is my
Oh.
favorite.
That's a good one.
Sacrament, so sacrament, son. The sin of simony, and you know that there's merde. You know,
I
my
know that one.
merde is shit in French.
I know that.
Merde.
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 Mm-hmm.
Merde.
But
I
thank
took
you
French in high school.
so much, Grace, for sending in
Grace
that
from
fan mail.
Toronto.
Grace from Toronto, thank you so much for sending in that fan mail. I love adding new curse words to my repertoire. As you know, I have so many on this show.
I will be going around the lab going tabernacle.
Tabernacle. And I'm sure your lab tech will know what you're talking about
Lab
because
tech.
there are definitely French.
Chalice.
Chili's, yeah, I'm gonna start pulling him out. So he's like, how do you know that?
I'm sure there's French Canadians on the Maple Leafs that he knows of. So yes, thank you so much, Grace from Toronto, for sending that in. If
Yes.
you ever want to
Yay.
send in fan mail, you can always do so. We accept it on any of our social media platforms, include X, Threads, Instagram, or you can send it to our email, which is srspod@protonmail.com.
I still don't love that you say X. It's Twitter.
Okay, well, you need to get off that Nazi website.
It's an important fan
I
of
kind of agree.
And it's a Nazi space too. With that, that is all we have got for you. We will see you next week when we cover
Yay.
fan fiction. Woo! Second favorite part. We're gonna have Amanda and Lau and our special guest submit fan fictions for us to maybe read out loud.
Oh.
See?
Okay.
We will
I
be
have
back.
homework now.
I have homework now.
What's up with editing? I have homework.
I have homework. All right. See you all soon.
I have what? I'm usually the one that assigns homework.
I
Not the
know,
one
right?
that has it.
You're back on the other side.
I know, right?
Since Rookie Season is created by Lauren, Lau, and Amanda.